Ready to stitch block 6. So here it is, and the position in the quilt will go right here. You only need to make 4 of these for your main quilt, so let's get started stitching block 6. Here's a peek at your block 6, and the supplies we will need for block 6 are of course your battleizer hooped up and ready to go. You'll need a square of your background fabric B, a strip of fabric 7, a smaller square of your background fabric A. If you're doing the optional colored back, you'll need a square of fabric 5. Here's your optional wool with our edges prepared. You'll need thread A, thread B, thread C, your quilting thread with a bobbin, and your regular embroidery thread. So let's take this to the machine and get stitching. Okay, I'm ready to sew the placement stitch. Step 1 for block 6. Water soluble thread in the needle. Step 2 is our optional wool. And if you're not using wool, you can skip step 2 and move on to step 3. Step 3 is placing our background fabric B right side up, centering it over your placement stitch or your wool, and stitching the tack down with the same thread, the water soluble thread. And in this step, it's going to also stitch some placement stitches for your fabric. Step 4, we're going to put thread B in the needle only, and it will stitch some decorative stitches. Step 5 is next, and we're going to place fabric 7 over this area right here. So we'll place it right side up, making sure I have a little more than a ½ inch up at the top of the block, and I can feel where my stitching line is to make sure I'm centered. And I've got water soluble thread in the needle, and we'll stitch the placement stitch. So the next step is to place this same fabric 7 in another part of the block. So I'm going to trim the fabric off right here, just roughly, leaving plenty in my seam allowance. And now the fabric 7 is going to go in this area. So again, we'll place it right side up, making sure it's centered, still with water soluble, and we'll stitch it down. Now we do have to trim those areas, but there's another applique that we can do real quick and then trim it all at once. And that'll be step 7. And that's going to get your background fabric A up in this area right here. So we'll place that again right side up and stitch that down, still with the water soluble thread. So now that all of this is tacked down, now we can trim it. So I do like to get my hoop on a flat surface so that I can turn it. So I've removed the hoop from the machine. And on this block, on this particular fabric, we need to keep your fabric in the seam allowance on the outside of the block. And on the inside of the block, we're going to trim it nice and close. And we'll do that with all of this. So out here, this is the outside of the block. I'm going to trim that. So there's a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch on the outside. And on the inside, nice and close, because this will be an applique. So we're nice and close here. We've got fabric in our seam allowance on all of these appliques. And now we'll put it back on the machine. So we're going to put our thread C or our thread D, depending on what you've chosen for your fabric. So I'm going to go with my thread C, and it will do the satin stitch on either side of these two teal colored appliques. Step 9 is going to be the satin stitch on this piece of fabric, and it can be thread C or D depending on your fabric choice. Step 10, we've put thread A in my needle, and it's going to do a decorative stitch over the top of the satin stitch. Step 11, time to put the back on. So I've taken my hoop off the machine, turned it over, and the fabric we're going to use for the optional backing is fabric 5. So you'll place that right side up, making sure it's centered over your stitching. Smooth it out and put it back on the machine and stitch it on. Stitching on my backing with the water-soluble thread for step 11. Ready for step 12, the last step, which is the quilting, and we're going to put thread C in the needle and the bobbin because it's our quilting step, and we're also going to make sure that the thread cutter is turned off so we have a nice tidy looking back, and mine is. And we also want to make sure we bring our bobbin thread up to the top when we start, so that we don't get a nice little wad of thread on the back. It'll look nice and pretty. Block 6 is done. Time to take it to the cutting table and get it trimmed. So now we are ready to trim up block 6. We're going to use our trimmer by George with the metal edge. Pull the front back. Trim off our excess battleizer and backing. And so the back has got all the battleizer and the backing removed. So now we'll put it face up again, turn our trimmer over, and place the 1/4 inch line right on the basting line and trim all 4 sides. So here we have block 6 all trimmed and ready to go.